Let's be real. Cars from the 1970s had personality. Some were absolute legends, and others, well, they looked like design experiments gone horribly wrong. Today, we're counting down the 12 ugliest cars of the 1970s. The ones with bizarre shapes, awkward designs, and body styles that made no sense. These cars weren't just unattractive. They were dumb, unsporty, and completely unaerodynamic. Buckle up, because this is going to be one weird ride. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe for more brutally honest car breakdowns. The AMC Gremlin looked like someone sliced off the back of a normal car and called it a day. It had a long front end and a stubby rear that made it look like it was constantly unfinished. The designers at AMC wanted a compact car that stood out, but instead they created something that looked both squashed and stretched at the same time. Why did it look so weird? Because AMC tried to save money by cutting corners, literally. Instead of designing a completely new car, they took an existing AMC Hornet and chopped off the back. The result? A car that looked like it had been rear-ended before it even left the factory. Functionally, the Gremlin wasn't the worst car on this list, but let's be honest, it wasn't winning any beauty contests either. The proportions made no sense, and despite some decent performance under the hood, it never looked like a true muscle car. More like a car that shrunk in the wash. Ah yes, the Ford Pinto. The car that was so badly designed it could literally explode. But even if we ignore its terrifying safety flaws, the Pinto still deserves a spot on this list just for how downright ugly it was. The design was just wrong in every way. The Pinto had a weirdly short hood, a bubble-like cabin, and a rear end that looked like it was borrowed from a completely different car. Instead of looking sleek or aggressive like a muscle car should, it looked awkward, tiny, and just off. Ford wanted to create an affordable compact car, but in their rush to do so, they forgot to make it attractive. Its weird proportions made it look like a squash station wagon, and its tiny wheels made it seem like it was struggling to hold itself up. And let's not even talk about the ugly, oversized bumpers that Ford added later to meet new safety regulations. The Chevrolet Chevette was supposed to be cheap, practical, and fuel efficient, but somewhere along the way, GM forgot to give it a decent design. Instead, they ended up with a car that looked boring, boxy, and completely uninspired. It had a bland front end, an awkwardly tall roofline, and tiny wheels that made it look like a toy car. There was absolutely nothing sporty or stylish about the Chevette. It looked like a car designed by someone who had never actually seen a car before. But here's the kicker. The Chevette was actually one of the best-selling small cars of its time. People bought it because it was cheap and reliable, not because they liked how it looked. Let's just say no one was putting Chevette posters on their walls back in the 70s. The AMC Pacer is proof that just because something is different doesn't mean it's good. Designed to be futuristic and unique, the Pacer ended up looking like a rolling fishbowl. With massive glass windows and a short, stubby body, the Pacer looked completely out of place next to real muscle cars. The designers thought the large windows would make the car feel spacious, but all they really did was make the Pacer look like a giant greenhouse on wheels. To make matters worse, the car was weirdly wide, giving it an even stranger look. Most cars in the 70s were long and sleek, but the Pacer looked short and bloated, like a car that had been inflated like a balloon. The Mustang II was supposed to carry on the legendary Mustang name, but instead, it ended up being one of the most disappointing Mustangs ever built. Ford decided to shrink down the Mustang to make it more fuel efficient, but in the process, they sacrificed everything that made the original Mustang great. Instead of looking like a muscle car, it looked like a bloated Pinto, because, well, it was based on the Pinto. The proportions were all wrong. The Mustang II looked too small, too weak, and completely unaggressive. It lacked the muscle and attitude of its predecessors, making it one of the ugliest and most forgettable Mustangs in history. The Dodge Aspen looked like it was designed by someone who had no passion for cars. It was as generic as a car could get. The body was boxy, uninspired, and completely devoid of personality. Instead of looking sleek or muscular, the Aspen looked like a government-issued fleet car. Boring, plain, and forgettable. And let's not forget the rust issues. The Aspen was notorious for falling apart almost as quickly as it rolled off the lot. Even if you could ignore its ugly design, the car's tendency to rust away made it even less desirable. We're just getting started with this list, and if you're enjoying this breakdown of ugly muscle cars, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more brutally honest car videos. Now, let's get back to the list. The Chevy Vega was supposed to be GM's answer to the growing demand for compact cars, but things went sideways fast. At first it looked okay, but the design didn't age well. The big front grille looked way too heavy for the car, and those square headlights gave it a sad, droopy look. Plus, the materials they used were cheap, so the whole car felt flimsy, like a soda can on wheels. What really ruined the Vega, though, was how quickly it fell apart. The body panels rusted almost instantly, and the engine overheated a lot. It was like GM cut every corner they could, and the result was a car that wasn't just ugly. It was a total mess. The Bricklin SV1 could have been cool with its futuristic gull-wing doors, but instead it looked like a refrigerator on wheels. The body was super boxy, and the stubby front made it look awkward. It came in bright colors like orange and yellow, which only made it stand out more, but not in a good way. Oh, and those fancy gull-wing doors? They were constantly breaking, so people often got stuck inside. The SV in the name stands for safety vehicle, but honestly, it just made the car feel like it was built more for practicality than style. In the end, it's a car people remember, but not for the right reasons. The Plymouth Volare is a perfect example of trying to be fancy, but failing. The design was all over the place, with a mix of sharp lines and round edges that didn't work together. The long hood and tiny trunk made it look unbalanced, and the vinyl roof just made it seem cheap. The Volare's biggest problem was that it didn't know what it wanted to be. Was it sporty? Was it luxurious? It wasn't either. On top of that, it was known for rusting quickly and having all kinds of quality issues. It's one of those cars that's ugly and a pain to own. The Mercury Bobcat was basically a dressed-up Ford Pinto, and honestly, slapping some chrome on it didn't help. It had this weird egg-like shape that made it look more like a toy than a real car. The oversized grille and tiny headlights didn't help its case either. The worst part? The Bobcat was just as unsafe as the Pinto, thanks to that infamous fuel tank issue. So, not only did it look bad, but driving one felt like a gamble. It's safe to say this car was more of a joke than a success. The Dodge Charger used to be the definition of cool, but the SE version from the mid-70s. Not so much. It had this bloated, chunky design that made it look like it had let itself go. The sloping roofline and tiny rear windows just made it look weird and awkward. The grille looked like it belonged on a truck, not a muscle car. Dodge tried to sell this as a more luxurious Charger, but it ended up looking like a muscle car that had given up. For fans of the original Charger, this version was a big letdown. Subaru 360 technically came out in the late 50s, but it stuck around into the 70s, and by then it was way past its prime. People called it the Ladybug because of its round, bug-like shape, but honestly, it just looked goofy. The tiny wheels, high roof, and cramped design made it seem more like a clown car than something you'd want to drive. By the 70s, most cars were moving towards sleek, modern designs, but the Subaru 360 looked like it was stuck in a different era. It was slow, underpowered, and just plain embarrassing to be seen in. Definitely not a good look. So, there you have it. 12 of the ugliest cars of the 1970s. Some of these were weird experiments. Others were just bad ideas that somehow made it to production. Which one do you think was the ugliest? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more videos like this.